Hi there, I'm Egil and I'm going to be your storyteller today. I'm a warrior, trader and of course runecaster and a bit of a know-it-all on history. But first of all, before we start, don't forget to press the old bell there and leave us a comment. So what am I talking about today? I've been looking at this old chain that I've been repairing from the kitchen. Good Viking chain. And it got me to thinking that chains, slavery. Okay, so I'll pull this down because it makes an odd noise. So, slaves, in the Viking Age, what's so special about them? Well, I suppose like all slaves, they're not very happy people. But the one thing Viking slaves could do is social mobility. That means theoretically you could become a slave and you could end up being a chieftain or even a jarl or king. There is a saga called the Laxdæla saga, and it's believed through research that it was written by a Scottish slave woman who became a chieftain. So it does actually happen that way. So slaves were nicknamed skraelings or nithings, nothings. They were identified by having an iron collar around their necks, and they were the lowest of the low. Most people, well, if you're self-employed as, I don't know, a cobbler or coin maker, you would have a house slave that would live with you, again would have an iron collar, and eventually, who knows, may be able to buy their freedom. People have this image of Viking slaves, oh, we just went out and killed them. No, these are people's property. They're expensive and they also do a good job. Did slaves have rights? Well, yes, they did. You couldn't kill one out of hand. You had to have a very good reason to do it. If a slave should catch his wife in bed with his master, he was allowed, under law, to go down to the creek, get a bucket of water, throw it over them and wish them good night. That's, on the face of it, seems to be a pretty low thing to do. But first things first, the master's wife would see him and she'd know what's gone on. There would be embarrassment all round. Slaves had various functions. Yes, you had them cleaning out pig pens, you had them doing ploughing, but also there were concubines. Now, if a rich man got married, his wife would produce a legitimate child, would be the woman he loved. Now, childbirth in those days was a very, very risky thing. It's over 50-50 as to whether the woman would survive or not. So you don't want to subject your wife to that kind of thing. Once you've got your son, heir and daughter and heir, you would have a concubine who your wife would choose. Very important, that. And that's what your Friday night special, so to speak. So, slaves, they could purchase their own freedom, they could win it, but how did they get them? Well, glad you asked me that. Slaves were prisoners of war and they did raids, hence the raiding of churches. In actual fact, when you think about it, clerics and nuns are ideal slaves. The worst they come out with is, Deus save me, God save me. And they're used to doing as they're told, and they're used to hard work. So, you start selling those off, you can make a good time. And they were called blaumen or blue men. What they would do, they would raid the monasteries, get the money together, go off to Constantinople, buy their blaumen, off to Ireland, sell them to the Irish, off raiding. By the time they come back, unfortunately the poor fellows had died of exposure. It was a good trade while it lasted. But where do we get the word slave from? It's, the Vikings would say the Slavs were the best people to have as slaves. So the word stuck and we've got it as slave. This is only, as I say, a thumbnail sketch about the slave trade then. It's a very contentious issue even today, and modern slavery, we've got it today, and it's a terrible thing. Human trafficking, basically that's what slavery is, and it's wrong. We all know it's wrong, and we've got to try and stop it. It doesn't do anybody any good, and it's an abuse of your human rights. So let's hope that this horrible spectre of the past is just a memory. Okay, hope you've enjoyed that, and we shall cover it probably later on in greater detail. Till we meet again, bye.